All right, it's about a week later and just got this guy back from Byrd. They had to turn down the diameter on the shaft right there to get the pulley on. And so I asked them if they would assemble this for me if I sent them the parts, and they said no problem. So they got the bearings pressed on, everything torqued down, and so as is, this is ready to drop in the machine. So we're gonna do that right now. First thing to go back in is the feed rollers, and I did put new new bearings on these guys. So the knurled one goes back here, and the smooth one right here. And these just kind of float in here, and then the bearing housings will locate these in place. Let's see if I can lift this thing up. Beautiful. Bolts go back in. All right, the head is in there. I got the chip deflector back in, little springs attached down there, and got this rod in here that supports the dust collection hood assembly. And so before I go any further right now, I want to see if this thing is parallel to the planer bed. There's a little bit of slop in it where it could be adjusted. I'm hoping it's just good and we don't have to mess with it. So, trying to see. All right, so I'm getting like 88.5, and we'll just zero this side here. All right, so we'll call that 0. Over this side. Holy smokes. 2 thou. I ain't touching that. That's good, I'll take it. Alright, so pull this guy out, and then we'll get on to the dust hood. Alright. I'm guessing this is going to be the trickiest part of this whole thing, so we'll see what happens here. Okay, so I've stepped back and found a piece of small square stock, and I've got everything stitched in place except for the last set of washers and this one, which is in the wrong spot, but we'll change that out as we go. So we're going to start pushing the main rod through and see what happens. first 3 on, and then pull that shit. Oop, there we go. Nice. Yeah. Through first. Oh god, there's a notch on the end here for these to line up, and I forgot about that, so that's probably what the problem was. Oh, did we get it? All right, we got it. She's in. Let's see. All right, so we'll see that's in. And we'll go ahead and pop on the retainer there and the lock there, and then we'll about be ready to move on to the tables. All right, now we're dropping the springs back in for the feed rollers, and we'll probably have to play around with these to get the tension right once we get it up and running. Get it where it's bottomed out, and then another turn or two. A good starting point. Right about there. And then cover plate for the mortising chuck. All right, that's it for this side of the base. I think we'll put the top end back together and then move on to finish off on the back side. All right, now we'll lower the tables back down. There's a surface here that these guys rub on, so just give those a little bit of grease. And sure everything is clear. All right, so we got the tables back down in position, and before we can lock them down, we need to put the end caps on each table, lower them down, and then get what we'll start with is the infeed table, and get it zeroed out so it's in plane with the top of the cutter head. and then we'll adjust the gauge here to 0 so that they'll match up, and then that one will be good, and then we'll do the same on the outfeed. All right, this took a little while to understand how all this stuff kind of works together here, but I think I've got the table where it needs to be. These two clamps get tightened all the way, snug to this bar. These two just get snug, but have to be loose enough that they can still pivot on the bar, which I don't understand why, but is what it is. So got those set. This end cap goes on and it gets bolted down to each bar and floats up against the table. But again, here it has to be just touching because as the table moves up and down, it slips right there. So if you tighten these down hard, you'll bind it up. And so I got the table adjusted where it was zeroed out with the cutter head, and then I was able to get the adjuster here zeroed out as well. So we'll set that to 0, lock that down, and then we can pull the table into position, lock it, and then check it with the one-way gauge. So bring in here so you can see this. All right, so you'll get the idea here. So got the gauge zeroed out to the top of the table, and then we'll come over here, and as we come up, boom, just shy of 0. There we go, that's 0. We were on the edge of the cutter there the first time. Come back right up to 0. You do want to be on the center of these carbides because they do feather off on the edge, and right up to 0. The same thing over here. Or was that about 1 under? About 1 under. A 2 under. And this is a 16-inch machine, so you know that's, I'm gonna say that's pretty good. There we go. 1 on the 0. Zero. So and the main adjustments on this machine have never been touched. It's about 20 years old and I'm the second owner. And this was moved. I picked it up with an engine lift and brought it here on a trailer and unloaded it and put in an aftermarket cutter head. And even after all that, we're still pretty much 0 from end to end between the table and the cutter. So that's pretty impressive, and you know, that says a lot for, I think, both the machine and the quality of the cutter head as well. So now we'll do the same thing on the outfeed table, and then once that's set, then we can put the front cap back on. All right, so I'm trying to get the locking pins to engage at the same time on this side. If they don't engage at exactly the same place, because you have 4 points of contact on this table, you can tweak the table. So I've got it kind of zeroed out here. I've got one indicator over this pin and then another indicator over that pin. And I've got it where, you know, I can just bring the lock to where it feels like it bottoms out, and pretty well coming back to 0 every time. So now what we're gonna do is tighten it as we normally would, just give it a little snug and then see how much it moves. So up here, looks like we moved maybe 1/8 thou or so. Let's see if I can. Okay, and then down here, got a little bit more, about 13. It's not too bad, so within 5 thou. So find 0, yep, so feels pretty close to 0, maybe 1 or 2 over. And you tighten up, it goes up to 13. So that means this side is diving down just about, we'll say 5 thousandths. So I need to unscrew that leg. In fact, I'll just go ahead and show you that adjustment now. So, and I'm at the same time trying to get this table coplanar to the cutter head. So we'll double check that before we move anything here. So we're at 92, 91, 92, 93. There we go, 92. I think we might be there. Yep, almost to 94, 92, 93. All right, so I think the table is planar to the cutter head. So I think just that one adjustment there and we might have it. So let's check this again. Remember. All right, so we're set back up over here, and so kind of that 0 is really easy to hit on the bottoming out. In fact, they're both hitting at the same time, which is good. So I think we're really close. So now we'll tighten this as we normally would, just to snug up. And there we got, 9.5 on that dial. And you can see it here. There you go, right at 7 on that dial. So I think I'm going to call that good. It's 0, tighten up, 7. In fact, that one's at 5, 6, 7. There's 8. So if I keep going, this one will push a little bit further, and that one stays the same, but I don't think that's worth chasing. So we'll just kind of note that when we tighten this up, we just give it just that little bump, and that gives us perfect even pressure there. Getting the outfeed table adjuster in the right position was tricky because there's no indicating lines like on the infeed table. So I just had to lay it down in there and then measure from the table to the cutter head, and it's got a fairly narrow range of adjustment because for the most part you want your outfeed table to be 2 or 3 thou below the top of the cutter head. And finally got it in there, and we're right in that 2-3 thou range. And so I think we're finally ready to bolt on the front cover and put everything together in the back. Fold this guy down here. Locking pin, gauge. We'll just kind of go to a random spot and see what we got. So again, we're 0 on the table, and we'll come up to that dude, and we're coming up. Yep. Oh, and actually that one's all the way up to 0. Let's check out the ends before. And now we're at 0, but that's fine. We can readjust that. We're 0 there, 0 there. See if we're 0 at this end. within a thou. I'll take that. All right, we're gonna move on to the back side before we make any final adjustments on the front. So two main things to do back here. Reinstall these two sprockets here and here with the chain drive, and then put the drive belt on and retension that, and then button that up. So I'll bring it back once that's done. All right, sprockets and chain are back on the tensioner, and the main drive belt is on. It's tensioned back up, just like before. The tensioning screw is on the other side here under the planer bed, and you got your 4 main flange bolts to tighten it up. So all that's tight, so we are finished on the back side. We're gonna go ahead and put the cover plate back on and then finish up out front. All right, we're almost there. I've got the tables tuned up. I was very fortunate. I didn't have to do too much fiddling, except for on the outfeed table, to get them both in plane with the cutter head. And so now we're gonna put the front cover on, and then I think we're ready to fire it up. Everything seems to be working well on here. I did notice one thing today using the planer for the first time, that as I ran a board through, as soon as the board was no longer engaged with the infeed roller, it would stall out and you'd have to grab it by hand and pull it out the other side to finish the cut. And so I believe this cutter head is just slightly larger than the stock one, and so as the board goes under the outfeed roller, it's too thin and the roller wasn't touching it. It was only by, maybe 10 thousandths or so, but enough that it wouldn't finish feeding the board out. So what I did was came down here, and there's some little covers and a jack screw that you can see the bearing sits on right there, and one of those on each side, and that's what sets the height of this roller. So I dropped it down by about 50 thousandths, and that should do the trick. We're going to try it out now.